Welcome, Pewter Report readers and listeners, to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. Yes, it is a Victory Monday, in case you were wondering. All of the Mondays until next season are Victory Mondays, and then probably even most of the Mondays next season will be Victory Mondays, because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are Super Bowl champs, the only team in the NFL to end their season with a victory. So, yeah, we get not only that Lombardi trophy they're tossing around over the water, but we also get Victory Mondays here on until next season if the Bucs ever lose again. Who knows? Who knows if they will? And to help them maybe never lose again will be this year's draft class, and we're going to talk about the draft class a little bit. I know we are about 3, maybe more months late for talking about the 2021 draft class and than you're typically used to as a Bucs fan. So we've got to dive into it at some point. I know nobody wants to move on from this past season, but we figured after the weekend, you live it up, you love it again. We got to turn the page at some point a little coming back. Don't worry to that amazing season. But we do have to turn the page a little bit to talk about the NFL draft and to talk about what the Bucs could be looking at with pick number 32. Not sure if you heard, but 32 is where the Bucs will be picking. That's the spot that's at the end of the first round. They reserve it for the Super Bowl champion. I'm not sure if you knew that. I just wanted to make sure you were aware. But before we do that, first we've got to take a look at our sponsor, the beautiful and the wonderful and the glorious taste of Celsius. Celsius powers active lives every day with essential functional energy. You see, I got my orange. I didn't have any orange sickle in the fridge, but I got the orange. It's the next best thing. I had to get those up there, and I had to make sure that I had a little bit of sip. I know we're going to have dinner soon. It's not like I would drink them in the night podcast, no problem. That was not an issue for me. But I did want to make sure that I gave the orange a shout out, the sparkling orange, I should say. Remember, no sugar in these things. It is really, really good energy. You're not going to get that drop-off that you get with other energy drink products, and you're going to get the flavor and the kick and the pop that you get from drinking soda, really. And so I talked to a couple Pewter Report listeners and readers that told me it's basically replaced soda for them, drinking Celsius. So a much, much healthier option, and just gives you a great little boost for your day as well. So make sure you check out Celsius. You can order them on Amazon, or you can check around and get the store locator up at Celsius.com. You can check out their options there, and you can find stores near you to carry them. But always good stuff going on with our friends over at Celsius. Mark Cook, you were on the podcast, sir. What is up?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
All right, good. Okay, not much. Celsius available at Publix. I was at Publix the other day and noticed Celsius on the shelves.
Yeah.
At least over at the Brandon location. Also, Wawa, you can find them around here. So anyway, lots of places to find Celsius. It is just growing and blowing up and getting more and more popular. I have so many people that hit me up on Twitter and different social media things telling me how much they enjoy Celsius. So anyway, good people too. Had a great time at the Celsius party last week. I know Scott mentioned that on the podcast the other day. But anyway, good people, good company, and a really, really good product. So make sure that you are knocking over your microphone as you reach for your Celsius.
Anyway. Oh, we got the same kind.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll probably
orange, as you say. Orange.
Orange. Do I say orange weird?
You say orange.
Orange.
When you said orange.
Orange. There's a lot of ways to say it, man.
What I love, I was really concerned when we hired you that you were going to have that really bad
Yinzer.
That bad accent from Pennsylvania, but you
that's
sound
a
fairly
Pittsburgh
normal.
Area thing. Yeah, I'm a little bit too far outside of Pittsburgh. There were people that lived around me growing up that talked like that, but not in my family. I'm a little too far outside of Pittsburgh to have the Yinzer in there. I never said Yins. Never was a Yins guy. So thank the Lord for that.
Yes.
All right, we got to talk about this draft outlook for the Bucs. I mean, I know I was saying this before you got on, Mark, that it's like weird for Bucs fans probably that we haven't turned the page to the draft at all until this point. Really, we really haven't even talked about prospects at all. I don't think you said a prospect's name on this podcast, and we're the second week of February, I think.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy. We aren't even going to talk a lot about specific prospects today. Because I know both of us are probably still looking at trying to figure out who's in the class. I've kind of known who's in the class, but I'm trying to take a deeper look at people before. I will throw out a few names here and there as we go through position groups. But I wanted to start. Well, actually, let's start with a couple of these comments first, because Dragonlope, I know he's been waiting to make this point. John, man, I called the blowout. He called the blowout in the Super Bowl. I'm assuming he's talking about. I want to backpedal on the 5-11 prediction, though. 5-11. Dragon.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, man. Just want to say, great podcast this season. Got me through work. We appreciate that for sure. Podcast has been a ton of fun, and we are going to have a ton of fun this offseason too. We're really, really excited about the podcast and the direction that we're going in the offseason, and some guests we have lined up and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's going to be a good time for sure. And Ness wants to go, are you going to do a second podcast being nameless? We know it's the Pewter Report podcast. How about we get your name instead? I'm assuming he's talking about my name being under like the when you scroll over my name that it's like says Pewter Report podcast. Well, the reason that is that way is because we changed it for the show at Glory Days, and which was I didn't want it to have my name. I wanted it to have the podcast name, and it doesn't show it to me before we get on. So I keep forgetting to go into the settings and change it before we come up. So
let's just call you Pewter Report Podcast the rest of the show.
I was going to say you can just refer to me as PR or Pewter. Yeah. So I hear see some people already asking about edge rushers in this class, potential edge rushers in this class. We will get to those guys. I want to start a quarterback though, Mark, because we kind of didn't have a chance to touch on this because the Bucs were kind of in the throes of that Super Bowl run. But you wrote about Kyle Trask potentially being a fit for the Bucs in the first round, at the end of the first round. I think this was when they were either going to be 31 or 32 for sure. Right. So now picking 32, Kyle Trask potentially being available there. My guess, and it is a guess at this point because we've probably less information and less vision into the draft process than we've ever had before. But my guess is that we see 5 quarterbacks off the board before before the Bucs pick. Those 5 being the big 4, kind of Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, and then we're probably going to see Mac Jones go somewhere in the teens would be my guess. There's just too many teams that need quarterbacks this offseason. It's like the opposite of last year. Everybody's trying to turn the page and flip to a new chapter. And so because of that, the Bucs are thinking about the future of the quarterback position. You posited that Kyle Trask could end up there. What are your thoughts on that potentially happening?
Well, it's really a guess, but we do know that the Buccaneers have some genuine interest in Kyle Trask. Now, again, they also have interest in Trevor Lawrence, but they know they're not going to draft him. And so, having interest in pulling the trigger are 2 different things. One thing that I did write about in today's Monday mailbag is maybe this is the year that you take a bit of a flyer. And I say a flyer because when you get and again, Tom Brady is the perfect example of a guy who wasn't a top 15 pick that's the greatest of all time. Mm-hmm. But we know that most quarterbacks or the better quarterbacks are the ones that are selected earlier in the first round. So if you're taking a gamble at one at 32, it is a bit of a gamble. But maybe this is the year to do that. And I say that because when you look at this roster, John, what position, and we'll throw this out to the listeners as well, which position is open for an actual battle for a first-round rookie to step in and take a job of somebody? I mean, as of right now, just assuming that Shaq Barrett is back, assuming Ndamukong Suh is back, and Rob Gronkowski is back, where is there an open position for a player? And I'll finish it up, and then we'll discuss that for a second by saying, in my opinion, there's not really any big glaring needs on this football team. Yep. Now, obviously, depth and down the road, and what's JPP going to do in 2 years, and things like that. You've got to look ahead. I get that. Don't get me wrong, but the quarterback is just as important as an edge rusher. And if Kyle Trask is your guy, then and you do have high hopes for him, and I'll talk about what I've heard from the Buccaneers in a little bit on Kyle. But where are the glaring needs? I think this might be the draft again. If you've got him as a first rounder, that you would maybe take a flyer on him.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at this, but I like the framework of the question that you've kind of proposed is that, okay, where are the needs? Where are the starting spots? Like we knew that as soon as Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield were drafted, there was a good chance those guys were going to start and play a lot, at the very least play a lot in Winfield's situation this season. So, I mean, it was not a surprise when either of them were week one starters. And this year, it's much harder to see that, right? I mean, if they bring back the players we expect, and again, we're operating out of what we expect to happen this offseason. We expect Shaq Barrett to be back. We expect Levante David to be back, Chris Godwin to be back for the season. And so when you look at it that way, you know, there are really not any starting spots up for grabs. You know, the one would be defensive tackle, right, where Ndamukong Suh could potentially retire. We'll see what he ends up doing. But you expect Will Golston to be back the way the roster currently sits. You know, you'd expect, you know, he is. I will say this about Will Golston and Cam Brate. We'll throw it out there that they are Cam Brate $6.5 million, Will Golston $5.5 million. None of that's guaranteed for either of those guys. Brate almost certain to have his contract restructured. Golston probably depends on what other kind of moves are made at defensive tackle and interior defensive line. Those guys could be cap casualties depending on how things go. They could take pay cuts. One of them could take pay cuts, both of them. But Brate for sure will. I mean, he already did last year and probably will be asked to again. So there's potential cap situations there, but that's really the only spot. I mean, defensive tackle, if Seward retire or something would happen to Golston, you know, that would be the only spots who's going to play next to Vita Vea that they don't have future, right? Because Steve McClendon's older and Raheem Nunez-Roches is a free agent, and he's just a journeyman guy. He's a depth guy. That's all that he is, really. And so they definitely need to invest at that position. It's also unfortunate this is one of the worst defensive tackle classes that we've seen in quite some time. I'm just early in evaluating the class. I've seen everybody else's rankings, and it's almost unanimous agreement that this defensive tackle class might not even have a first-round worthy player. Christian Barmore, Alabama, maybe, but again, there's not a lot of experience there in just a few games. So that's the one position I would say. Now, I bet Ronald Jones starts at running back, Mark, but that's the other one that you could say, okay, maybe a guy doesn't start, but he's probably going to play a big role. Clearly, This team isn't sold on Ronald Jones. He's not developed as a pass catcher and pass protector. They really value that to the point that they just went ahead and started Leonard Fournette over him in the playoffs. So to me, that's the other position that if you're looking for a starter in the first round and you didn't get anything in free agency or in the offseason, running back looks tempting at 32.
And I think, and again, I talked about this in the mailbag today, that, you know, I do believe the team's going to be looking. I think, you know, we know that Brady was instrumental in the bringing of Rob Gronkowski here, LaShawn McCoy, Leonard Fournette. He probably said, you know, hey, let's bring him aboard. I think he's going to be in Jason Light's ear about some of these free agent running backs that are going to be out there. There's a few that he played with in New England. Rex Burkhead's one, and James White is another one. Again, those are short-term solutions. But again, this is we can argue that this team is built for long-term success, and they are at certain positions, definitely. But at the same time, again, it's all in for 2021 again. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. So Jason Light, I don't know, is going to sign free agents based on, you know, what he thinks, you know, 3 years down the road. He's thinking about who can help us repeat and get a Super Bowl ring again this year. I do like the idea of a running back thing. I think Ronald Jones, to paraphrase Denny Green, he is who we think he is. I mean, he's a very good, solid running back that can gain 1,000 yards in a season, but he's not a versatile running back. And we know Tom Brady and what they did in New England love versatility at the running back position. And they tried this year. They tried with LaShawn McCoy. It didn't work out. They did their damnedest to get Keyshawn Vaughn on the field, and every time that he did, he just dropped the ball, fumbled, whatever it was. So he wasn't the answer. And again, he may take that. We can't forget how bad Ronald Jones was as a rookie. I wish he would have been here, John, to see. I mean, I've never seen a first-round pick. I would have to go back to probably the 80s with some of the picks that the Buccaneers had in the first round that just was as bad as Ronald Jones. I mean, he wasn't a first-rounder, but he was a second-rounder, and he was just awful. And I think he averaged less than 2 yards a carry. I know he had less than 100 yards as a rookie. So I assumed he was a bust. So there's hope for Keyshawn Vaughn. But again, where's that ceiling for him? Is he more of a versatile back? Is he a better pass catcher? His tape last year or a couple years at Vanderbilt showed, he's decent at that. But again, it's not his forte. We'll see what happens. I like the idea of a quarterback here, maybe only because you're not going to have that many more years with Tom Brady under center that a guy could possibly learn behind. I thought the Packers were crazy when they drafted Aaron Rodgers when they had Brett Favre, and I really thought they were nuts last year when they drafted Love when they had Rodgers as a starter.
They were.
But I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, I agree. Not just because he's not going to play for a while. He's just I don't think he's that good. I don't think he's worth where they picked him at. But anyway, we'll see. I mean, maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. And as somebody brought up, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Rev Fish on our message boards. But somebody asked me recently, or no, actually, it was my brother of all people. My brother in the Monday mailbag last week said, "Do they just give up on trying to find a franchise quarterback because they're a team that haven't been able to do it in 46 years? Is this the new formula to try and plug and play a veteran guy in?" Okay, well, yeah, that's fine, except Tom Brady comes around every 20, 30 years, and you're still competing against 31 other teams in free agency, so I don't know that that's the successful route to go as well. But anyway, it's what makes the draft so fun.
Well, I mean, I think running back, I see good points even being brought up in the comments, and I want to make sure we get to them. But yes, running back is definitely, these can all be true. Running back is a clear need on the Bucs team, and it's a clear need that I don't think they're settled on as a franchise. I really don't think, as a front office, as a coaching staff, I think they're in agreement. They're not settled on this position. I think that they appreciate what Leonard Fournette was able to give them. They recognize by the end of the year he's our best 3-down option, and really after the bye we need to be more unpredictable about whether we're going to run or pass on certain downs. So they didn't really feel comfortable just doing a 3rd-down option. They wanted to throw more on 1st down. They had to have Leonard Fournette in the game there. They clearly threw the ball more on 1st down, so Leonard Fournette therefore played more. It's just kind of a ripple effect of those kind of things. But I really feel like Leonard Fournette was the number one back by default more than it was he's this elite player that they want to, that's a top 5 pick that they think is going to be the future at their position. I think Leonard Fournette will probably get some money thrown at him based on the way he finished the season and his pedigree by another team this offseason. I don't think it's going to be very cheap to bring him back, extremely cheap to bring him back. And they need it to be cheap to bring him back. They just do. I mean, you don't want to pay more for Leonard Fournette than you're paying for Rob Gronkowski this year per year. And you don't want that over a long amount of time. You have lots of priorities on this team. Leonard Fournette is not somebody you want to have long-term money wrapped up in. You don't want to pay running backs, period, really. I mean, James White may be so cheap and for such a short amount of time that it doesn't matter. We'll entertain that if the time comes. But you don't want to have any money really locked up in Leonard Fournette long-term when you want to sign Carlton Davis to an extension. Obviously, Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Chris Godwin, you want to sign those guys. When you might extend Ryan Jensen or Devontae Smith just to spread their contract hit out. But you're going to take a little bit of a risk in 2023 offseason. That's fine, but you can't have bad players or players that aren't worth their cost at that point in time either. So you don't want to have money wrapped up in Leonard Fournette. If he's dirt cheap, again, maybe, but that's the reason he was on the team this year. And so I have doubts about that being the case moving forward for Leonard Fournette. I really think someone else is going to pay him to do a lot more, and I think he's going to be happy to go there, and the Bucs will be happy for him. And I think the Bucs want one more year of Rojo, but they do not expect Rojo to be, at this point, they are not banking on him being that every down guy. So to me, when you are asking me how the Bucs see their own team, not necessarily I do, but I think the running back position is one of the biggest desires for them to fix this offseason. I don't think that it requires the 32nd overall pick, though. I think that you can do it at a less valuable pick. Now, I will recognize that at 32, there are typically not 32 first-round caliber players in a draft class. I know it's hard for people to understand sometimes, but you typically only have, in my opinion, maybe 15, 16, 17 at most first-round caliber players, and then you have to figure out needs and where those guys come off the board and everything like that. Typically, there's probably not one available, and probably not one at a position of need for the Bucs available at 32. So you do have to evaluate how are you getting into, kind of who the best player is at that position? How much does that matter? This is where I tie it back to your point about quarterback, Mark. The Bucs would be wise, as you're indicating, to think about quarterback. I agree with you on that. I don't think that it means they think about taking one in this year's draft, though, for a lot of reasons. Number 32 overall, you're typically not getting a great quarterback. Data has shown us that over the last 20 years. There are exceptions. Obviously, you've seen guys like Drew Brees, and then even later in the draft, Russell Wilson and Tom Brady, and those guys are the exceptions. Everybody likes
Right.
Yeah, everybody likes to hope that they're one of those three guys. Basically, those are the three guys in the last 20 years that have been like top 40 picks, first round picks that have worked out. Obviously, in a class like this, where you're looking at a ton of quarterbacks coming off the board, you're even less likely to get a good quarterback than you would be in some of those other classes. We can debate Trask another time. Really, I want to take a long look at him before I say anything, because I know we got Gators fans in here. I don't want to be slandering anyone, but here's my thought, Mark. What if you looked at this year's draft as an opportunity to set yourself up for a quarterback in next year's class, regardless of where you pick? So what I mean by this, Mark, would be, what if they looked at 32 as an opportunity to trade down? I'm probably going to be on this bandwagon all season long. I really think when you're at 32 and you don't have any crying needs like the Bucs, maybe if a great player falls, great. But you have so many options, man. Like, you have so many options, and the board could fall so many ways in front of you. I would be really serious about trading down if another team wants to come back up to 32 to get a fifth year option on a player. Let him take it, because for y'all, like, that's not a big deal right now for the Bucs. It's just not. The biggest deal for the Bucs is being able to gather some assets. So when they have to make that move for quarterback, maybe it's in the draft, maybe it's in free agency, maybe it's in a trade, but you want to have assets. The Bucs need to be thinking about ways to collect assets this offseason. Can they do that by trading back in the first round into the second round? I think they can. Can they probably get a similar caliber player at 32 that are at 45 than they would at 32, or 40 than they would at 32? Yes, I think they can. And so I would be looking to stockpile resources if I'm the Bucs. I would be looking at ways to achieve picks in this year's draft.
And I think Jason Light hinted at that on the podcast with you and Scott the other night. He talked about that. In fact, he brought it up. And that's a little
That's
bit
a
of
good
a clue.
point. He brought it up. Yes.
Yep. That's a little bit of a clue. That's the first thing it kind of, dinged in my head when I was watching the podcast. And you made a good point too, that this being not a very good defensive tackle class, at least in the first round. So maybe there is a couple guys that they like at that position, and they think that that's a position that they want to go with in the first round or their first pick. But like you say, trading down and picking up some capital, makes sense. And listen, why 32 is such a valuable pick, if you want to call it a valuable pick, is it's the last pick in the first round, and teams value being able to offer that fifth round option on a guy. And so you may have a team that has a guy that, that they really feel is a first rounder, and they want to have that first round options, maybe give you an extra third or a fourth round pick to be able to move up and give up their second round pick to be able to select a guy that they'll be able to, I hate to use the word control, but you understand what I'm saying. I mean, teams love to have that fifth round option. Now, you look at the percentages of fifth round option guys that are offered, and I think it's less than 50%, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but teams do like to have that, and teams have in the past moved back up late in the first round. Did the Buccaneers do that with Doug Martin back in 2012 or whatever year it was that they drafted him for that reason? I don't know. I think it was probably more that they thought he would go before they had an opportunity to pick him. But they've got a little bit of ammunition there if they do want to move back, in my opinion. And again, as you said, John, the fact that there's not glaring needs in this football team, and if you want to say running back is one of them, you're going to find a very good running back in the second round, maybe even the third round. We've seen that happen over the last few years. And anyway, or maybe they just, trade for Dalvin Cook. I don't know. Who knows? I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, we're going to say there's really not any big position of need at 32 that you have to address. And then we're also probably going to make a case for almost every position to be drafted there, because the reality is, when you don't have a crying need, you have to kind of look at the future, look at the best player available. That's really what you have to do. And so I look at a wide receiver class that's absolutely loaded. I know we've talked about quarterback and running back and looked at some of the possibilities there, but wide receiver class is absolutely loaded. Well, they don't need wide receivers. Scotty Miller's here. Tyler Johnson's here. Chris Godwin will probably be back. Well, Chris Godwin might be back, but he might be tagged. And so that's a very, very important position for the Bucs. So Johnson definitely impressed some as a rookie, but the fifth round pick, and I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's ever going to be Chris Godwin. I just don't. I think he's going to be a good player, but I've not seen him ever like I saw Chris Godwin coming out, or like I see Chris Godwin now, certainly. And so,
John, are you we're basing all this, as you mentioned, on guys coming back. But all of a sudden, Chris Godwin, the Buccaneers don't find a way to keep him, and he signs somewhere else. Now, all of a sudden, boom, there's who you're taking probably, right? One of these
Right.
receivers in a loaded class. Same
Right.
thing with Shaq Barrett at that point. Then you've got to be
Yep.
really serious. You got to think to yourself, man, we've got to find an outside linebacker that fits in
Mhm.
Todd Bowles' scheme here to replace him if you don't get
Right.
a J.J. Watt. So what happens is and I'll get a million questions between now and April on what the Buccaneers are going to do with that draft pick in the mailbag. But as I say every year, let's see what happens in March, because March dictates what happens in April in the NFL.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I don't know that Chris Godwin will be in Tampa Bay long term, but he is the one that's pretty obvious to me in terms of the tag. I mean, they obviously
Yeah.
probably want to use that tag, and they're not going to use it on Barrett again, obviously, because it's a much bigger hit.
Right.
And then same thing with Levante David. It's no point in using the tag on him. You want to work out like a 2-year, 3-year deal with Levante David. But Chris Godwin is looking to command top money at his position, and frankly, here's what could happen is the Bucs use the tag this year, great, but then next year Chris Godwin has a 1,400-yard season in 2021, and he wants to be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. Well, you're going to pay Chris Godwin $10 million more than you're paying Mike Evans. I just don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, I know Evans isn't going to care, but are you willing to tie that kind of money up in the wide receiver position? So, and then again, that's like the biggest case scenario. Chris Godwin wants 26, 28, whatever million after this season, and the cap goes back up and all that. And so, anyway, I say that to say wide receiver. I fully expect Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Scotty Miller, and Tyler Johnson at least to be on this year's team, on 2021 team. But it's down the road. Yeah, after this next season, I mean, if Tyler Johnson isn't ready to step into exactly Chris Godwin's role, do you want to have another option be able there? And in a great wide receiver class, if it's best player available, and you can't trade down, or you have traded down and there's still a great wide receiver there, yeah, I don't think it's wrong to take him at all. And you load up that room, assuming AB's not back, you would have a very loaded room still, but that's how the Bucs do it at wide receiver. That's how Arians has always done it at wide receiver. Look at those Cardinals teams, man. Larry Fitzgerald and John Brown and Michael Floyd. I mean, they just were loaded with wide receivers that could play. I mean, they would still drafting guys, to play certain roles. And Jaron Brown was playing, and he was playing a role for them. And J.J. Nelson was playing a little speedster role. And so they are always trying to load up that position group. I'm not saying take it at 32 or anything. I'm just saying we can't roll it out either, because the future of Chris Godwin long-term is unknown, even if it's pretty certain that he'll be on the 2021 roster. You don't know what Tyler Johnson is yet, and Scotty Miller is a role player. That's how the Bucs see him. They were clear about that this season when they signed Antonio Brown, and with the amount that they played Tyler Johnson. Scotty Miller does one thing for the team. He doesn't do everything for the team, and that's kind of how they see him. So I don't think he'll ever step into an every down role for this team, which is why I think that wide receiver 3, they either feel great about Tyler Johnson in that role this year along with Scotty Miller, or they draft somebody and Tyler Johnson or Scotty Miller play the role that they played this year, splitting time as the fourth guy. That could be a possibility too.
And again, it's just mind-boggling to me, who's covered this team full-time for 10 years. I mean, I worked back with Scott back when he started in 1995. I used to I don't know if you even know this, John. I used to just transcribe quotes back at the office on a word processor for Scott from the locker room. We had this big recorder thing, and so I did that for free. Every once in a while, Scott would give me like a T-shirt or something from the merchandise store to do it. But that's how I met Scott doing that, and the Tampa Tribune and some other writing things. But let's even go back to 95. I mean, man, to think about this football team going into a draft, as you say, here we are in the second week of April, and just not having a glaring need on this football team is just crazy for me to think. Yeah. I don't even know if I would have thought that was possible even at the end of 2019, to be honest with you, because there were so many question marks on this football team, particularly in the secondary. John, I don't know that I would have thought that at the bye week this year, because there were still so many question marks. I mean, we were ready to run Sean Murphy Bunting out of town. I mean, not literally, but I mean, I was almost in agreement with you that it was time to get this guy off the field, and let him sit back and play a big Ross or Russ, or I can't even remember how to say his name because I've said it wrong so many times. Yeah. Ross Cockrell. It's crazy to think about, man, how things have changed so fast with this franchise, and I think Buccaneer fans are happy about that. I mean, what team? I mean, yes, okay, the Chiefs should be good again next year, and they will be, and you could possibly see a rematch. Again, it's hard to repeat. We understand that. Yeah. But I mean, this football team, you add talent to it. I mean, this defense could be almost as scary as this offense next year too if they continued, because I think defensively there's still room for that to grow as well as the offense as well. So,
Yeah.
just adding talent, just throwing talent in the room. If this team stays healthy next year, I don't even. Somebody even asked me how many games did this team win next year. I wanted to say 14 games because I think they're capable of winning 14 like the Chiefs did this year in the regular season. I said 12 or more. But I don't, right now I don't think 14 games would be out of the question. But again, I know that's not really the topic of this show. It just things that pop in my head as we talk.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're right though, but I think also, it's important. We don't want to ever overreact to. We want to be as excited as we can be, but also, like you're saying, like we want to make sure we're looking at the sample size too. And I understand. Sean Murphy-Bunting did play a lot better in the playoffs. We'll see long term what he and Jamel Dean look like, but there's no question those are going to be the guys next year. Those two and Carlton will be the guys. Now, how well they play, whether they look like the regular season versions or the playoff versions, that will honestly, a lot of that will depend on Todd Bowles, because when he changed the scheme for them, they played a lot better. I don't think they were perfect, but they played so much better as press man corners than they did as just zone guys. Neither of them they're just not the forte of any of their corners. And so hopefully that's what the playoffs revealed.
And maybe we're talking about that now. Maybe cornerback itself, because Carlton Davis will be going into his 4th year. He'll be a free agent in 2022. And you talk about a position that's going to command a lot of money, especially when the cap jumps back up as we expect it to be in 2022. That's another thing. I guess if you're not going to go quarterback there, you go best player available, but maybe you also look at, and the Buccaneers absolutely, and all teams do this, but I know the Buccaneers do this specifically. They do look 2 years down the road at guys, number one, their age, their production, but also their contract status, where they're at. And again, they're finally in a position where they can actually draft based on that instead of just looking at it and then having to fill a hole somewhere. So, anyway, very, very interesting. Maybe they go cornerback. I haven't looked at the cornerback prospects at all. I don't know. I don't think this is as deep as it was in the last couple of years. But where are we at cornerback wise when you look at the overall depth of that class this year, John?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It could be a possibility. Again, we're just saying possibilities, right? I mean, I think possibilities are kind of what we're looking at here. And so I think possibly, yes, cornerback could be a need. There's no question in my mind. I think that they're probably going to go with those 3 guys next year. Now, Carlton Davis long-term, does he sign an extension? What happens with Carlton Davis? I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, I think that Carlton Davis is clearly pretty coveted by the team. I mean, he's a CB1. They view him that way. He said he was a top 10 guy, and that Bruce Arians said before the season, he's top 10 cornerback in the class. And so, I mean, I think they obviously view Carlton Davis in a very strong light. He matches up with wide receiver ones constantly for them. And so they feel really strongly about him. If they still feel that way after the season, which I'm assuming they do, then that's a guy that I would make a priority. And remember, we're thinking of all these contract extensions, but remember, cap hits are spread out over certain numbers of years. So that's how the Saints have been able to keep people forever. Now, they've also done it for a longer amount of time. So eventually they kicked the can so far down the road that it was going to catch up with them. The Bucs can give Carlton Davis a contract extension even this offseason if they wanted to, and they could extend him now. It is capped. It wouldn't until 2022 and the bigger maybe in 2023. And those cap hits in those years are fine. The Bucs they right now have the most cap space in the league for those years looking at their roster. So there's like a big projection out to those seasons. And I think that if they were to give him an extension this offseason, it wouldn't shock me. Again, they want to keep everybody together. I know at some point you probably have to let somebody go, but I don't know that it makes sense for that person to be Carlton Davis.
Right.
And just given where they're at with Shaq Barrett, I don't know that it makes sense for it to be him too. It could be Chris Godwin, but it would end up being after the 2022 season, I think. And we know how important that position is. So that's why I say I think wide receiver could be more likely than cornerback. I'm not saying any of these picks should happen or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the reality of the NFL is that you have to be forward thinking in a lot of these ways. And that just isn't the case right now with a lot of teams. And the Bucs need to make sure that they are doing that at these key positions. I'm sure they will. And that's going to be an option at 32.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. I'm getting some news here that I don't want to report on the podcast. Anyway, I'm
seeing the comments. I'm sure everyone's seeing about something about Vincent Jackson.
Okay. I
still kind of gathering the details, but it seems like a lot of people are aware of it.
Wow, that's that's true, and it looks like Channel 8 has confirmed that, that's a tough one. I just talked to Jackson Friday before the Super Bowl. We were anyway.
Yeah, the news right now.
Yeah, I talked to Vincent.
The news right now, by the way, if you're
Go
listening
ahead.
to the audio version of the podcast, is just that Vincent Jackson's passed away. I don't know anything more than that. And you saw it. Said it was confirmed by one verified source, at least.
It looks like a reporter from Channel 8 WFLA, our partner station, has confirmed it. We're going to work on that, obviously, here, just to make sure. Wow. I talked to Vincent, just a week and a half ago, right before the Super Bowl. We were talking about, in fact, we were talking about him coming out to the Top Golf event, and he had another obligation, and he said, let's catch up in the off season. Vincent was a guy that if people have been reading Pewter Report a while, obviously they know what he was to this football team, and Man of the Year nominee a few times. His work in the community with the homeless, with the military people. He came from a military family. I had a coach that I coached with in youth football, Coach Al, that I've got a video up on our Pewter Report YouTube page of he and Vincent having an interaction. Coach had cancer and came out to practice and wanted to meet Vincent before he passed away. And Vincent was kind enough during training camp that year to meet with Coach Al and spend some time with him. And it meant the world to Coach Al before he passed away. And so I'm just blown away right now if that's an actual report. So, wow.
Yeah, seems like a couple sources have verified it now that the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office is investigating the death of former Tampa Bay Buccaneers player Vincent Jackson. Jackson, 38, was found deceased on Monday, February 15th at the Homewood Suites located at Palm River Road in Brandon, Florida. So don't know many more details beyond that, but that's Josh Benson of WFLA reporting that about that. So a lot of people sharing Vincent Jackson memories and stuff right now, and I'm sure that'll be something that's difficult for a lot of people to wrestle with, and hopefully we can find some answers from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office on that. Definitely an amazing buck, an amazing dude from everything that I've heard for sure. So
just a great guy. We in the media used to give him a hard time because, there for a while he was the best Buccaneer on this football team. And, we got him basically once a week. He and Gerald were the two guys that, once a week we kind of got in open locker room. And, and we used to give him a hard time, not to his face, but, amongst the media that, come on, Vincent, you're not, Randy Moss or Jerry Rice here, jokingly. Because we only got him like once a week. He only talked like once a week, but what a super guy, man. And I like I said, I told him about what we were doing with the Top Golf thing to help raise money for Chris Godwin's foundation. He was real interested. He just couldn't squeeze it in during that weekend. He owned a business. He was either the owner or part owner of a restaurant here in the Bay Area. He was to Channel 10 WTSP. Some of you guys know Daisy Charlotte. She did a feature on him, I think it was right before Christmas, where he was handing out food and things like that to military families that needed it, or I don't even know if it was just military. I think it was Christmas gifts for military people. So I'm just at a loss for words, man. What a good human. But I mean, who knows what happened? We'll definitely have something as soon as we get more information up on pewterreport.com as soon as the podcast is over. I may, I'll look into that. In fact, I'm just down the street from where he essentially deceased. Palm River Road, that Homewood Suites area is actually right near where the Top Golf area is. But anyway,
okay.
Let's carry on with the podcast and get through this next 20 minutes. It's not going to be easy. Vincent was a great guy. If you guys have any Vincent Jackson stories, we can adapt. We can switch gears a little bit on the podcast, whatever we need to do since it's live. But anyway, rest in peace,
for sure.
Vincent Jackson.
Yeah, definitely tough one, man. That's going to be a tough one for a lot of fans and people who knew him and loved ones to wrestle with. He definitely had some awesome years with the Bucs and with the Chargers. Was a really fun player to watch, and sounds like a great guy too from everyone that covered them. We do want to jump in and keep talking about this draft stuff, but like Mark said, if anybody has anything that they want to share or about Vincent, definitely make sure we do that. But do want to mention too that it's been a year for the insurance world. Record number of named storms, at more than 30 storms, flooding in addition to wildfires, not to mention the pandemic. With the commercial property and homeowners rate increase across industry due to the catastrophes, Breyer Reeves agency has numerous carriers and options to help new and existing clients affected by these increases. Personal and commercial auto insurance is another line of business that Breyer Reeves Insurance can help with shopping through carriers such as Progressive, MetLife, Safeco, and Allstate, to name a few. The folks at Breyer Reeves Insurance are big fans of the Buccaneers and proud sponsors of the Pewter Report podcast on pewterreport.com. Visit Breyer Reeves Insurance or call 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166 today. So make sure you do that and talk to Sam and Breyer, Bigs Bucks fans as well, and I'm sure they'll have their thoughts on all of this as well when we talk to them next. But yeah, definitely a tragic situation, Mark, and it feels like, one that I'm sure Mike Evans will have thoughts on Vincent Jackson. I think when he was in the early part of his career, if I remember, Vincent Jackson was kind of like the veteran and one of the leaders of this franchise at that point in time. Like you said, one of their only really good players, one of their few bright spots, as somebody said. And so, man, it's just like one of those things that that players are going to have, players like he and Will Golden, Vontae David will have thoughts to share on a guy like Vincent Jackson. And you'd imagine Philip Rivers and others as well who were close with him, but a guy that a lot of people loved and respected. And I remember always hearing Trevor talk favorably about him as a Buck and as a person during our time that Trevor and I did the podcast together as well.
Yeah, let's go back to Breyer Reeves real quick, John, only because I love Breyer Reeves. You know why I love Breyer Reeves? Because they're my personal homeowners insurance agency. And I was speaking to Breyer recently at one of our events, the Glory Days event, and was explaining a problem that I was having with my home. And he actually recommended having an adjuster come out and take a look at it. And I called the following Monday, filled out the paperwork. 2 days later, had an adjuster out at the house, and the problem's getting taken care of. Something that I probably wouldn't have done, would have just dealt with and paid for my own. Again, that's why I love Breyer Reeves, because he's can give you that personal recommendation on certain things, John. Does a wonderful job with homeowners, but really all lines of insurance. There's nobody listening to this podcast right now that doesn't need some form of insurance, whether it be life, homeowners, auto, commercial, business, those kind of things. So check out, and maybe even boats. I don't know. Maybe Tom Brady should give him a call about that $2 million boat was floating around in the river last Wednesday. I would have definitely had insurance before I took off in my boat on that river. It was a madhouse at the Super Bowl parade. But anyway, definitely go check out Breyer Reeves. Give Sam or give Breyer a call. Good people, big Buccaneer fans. And next time we have an event, I'm sure they'll be there. Make sure you stop by and say hello to Breyer and Sam. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in real quick, John, because I haven't been on the pod when they were one of the sponsors recently. So anyway.
No, yeah, for sure. Let's jump back to pick number 32. And man, it's been tricky to figure out this defensive line class. I think most people expect, again, if we're talking about needs, most people expect defensive line or running back to be kind of at the top of that list for the Bucs. We'll continue to talk about other position groups as well, but did want to touch on the defensive line class really quickly before we wrap up here. I think Penn State's Jason Away will be a potential prospect there for the Bucs, I believe, this offseason. And I think that possible. We've seen a lot of people talk about Joseph Asai from Texas to potentially be a name there. We've seen Patrick Jones from Pitt thrown in there. I mean, there's been a lot of different people. A lot of different players have had names thrown out for the Bucs at that spot. Edge, defensive line, interior defensive line. I really think that this is a team that's going to look to fill most of their needs in the offseason and free agency. If there's a time to spend, it's this offseason for the Bucs. They are in a window where they legitimately could repeat. I mean, there's not an exaggeration to say that. That's how good the roster is across the board. It obviously depends on Brady staying healthy and being able to stay at the level of play that he's at. At some point, everybody's spending money. Like, it's not, everybody's like afraid to end up like the Saints. Got to understand, Bucs fans, it's important to be spending money to make your team the best it can be. Don't miss on the moves for sure. You're going to take some risks and some chances. I get it. Even the Chiefs have not had every move work out, nor did the Saints. But it is important to recognize those windows and go in when you can. And so I do think most of that'll be in this offseason, but I definitely think if you're talking need, Mark, 32 looks like a spot, the defensive line. Not only could there be players there worthy of that pick, but it could be also the thing that the Bucs are thinking about trying to get younger at those positions.
Yeah. I mean, and again, when you don't have those glaring needs, what a luxury it is to be able to, just take that best player available. And as I said earlier, just I've never experienced this, John. I mean, I've covered some bad football teams in the last 10 years, and the fact that they're at a position where they don't have a hole to fill, and that's not just in the draft, that's also in free agency. Again, there's things and pieces that you want to put together to help make your team stronger. But
right.
Again, we could go back to last year's draft, and there were glaring needs, and they addressed those, particularly at tackle. When they let DeMar Dotson walk, that was a huge need, and they signed Joe Hagan free agency, but that wasn't going to deter them really from finding a tackle at that position. And talking about striking gold with Tristan Wirfs, I don't know that enough has been said about him. I know that we on Pewter Report have mentioned it, but when you look at the fact that this guy played every single snap this season, the only player, if I'm not mistaken, played every single snap this season, and gave up one sack, is really just mind-boggling. As much as I've loved DeMar Dotson, and I was one of those guys saying, "Oh, you can get by another year with DeMar Dotson." Again, reason number 4,333. I'm not a GM of this football team because I might have rolled the dice with, because picking offensive line is the most unsexy pick you'll ever pick, right? Particularly in the first round in a top 15 pick. It's just not. It's hard to get excited about an offensive lineman as a general fan, and even myself in the media. I mean, it's not. You don't. Again, you get excited about the skill position guys because while we're supposed to be independent and all of those things and not biased, just as a general football fan, again, number one picks aren't that exciting. And but boy, they nailed it, and hats off to Jason Light, and he had to move up one pick to do it, but it was well worth it. He talked about that in the podcast, and I want to tell people, if you didn't listen to the Jason Light interview last week, really good stuff. It's on our YouTube channel. Make sure that you're subscribing to that as well. We're around 3,500 subscribers, I think, right now, John, which is just a tremendous jump. But let's keep boosting that up. Just subscribe. I subscribe to some other YouTube channels, and I don't actually get notifications because I don't hit the bell part of it, but I subscribe. So when I'm on YouTube, it will show me down at the bottom of my phone if there's a new episode of whatever it is that I'm subscribed to. So even if you don't want to be bugged with notifications, I don't like getting dings and banners and stuff on my phone, but click the subscribe. And that way, at least when you go on YouTube, which if you're like me, you're on it once or twice a day anyway for something, you'll see that there's a new episode. But anyway, sorry, man. I'm a little flustered with this whole Vincent Jackson thing, man. Dang it.
Completely understand that. No, for sure. I completely get it. It's the way that it is. And so, I think that, we were planning the off season, the podcast will be a little bit shorter. We usually are going like an hour or over an hour. So we need to try and shorten those down a little bit in the off season. So it'll be a little bit more quicker and quick hitting podcasts. Obviously with the Vincent Jackson stuff today, we are going to go over that a little bit to make sure we get everything in. But, I do want to mention two things before we wrap up and before I close this out. But one is that J.J. Watt, I see some people talking about it in the chats. I don't want to repeat things that I've written about too, but J.J. Watt, if you've read the article, I talked about it on pewterreport.com. I wrote about it on Saturday, I think it was. And Saturday, the article went up, and I talked about not only is it possible for the Bucs to sign J.J. Watt, but that they should really strongly look into it. Again, maybe J.J. Watt's asking for $17 million a year, which is what he was about to make before he got cut. I doubt he's asking for that. I think he wants to run a ring. The Bucs are a prime spot to do that. I think he'd be a great fit. I think it makes sense across the board with J.J. Watt in Tampa Bay, and they can do it. So go check that article out. I don't think he would have to replace anyone. I think they can bring Sue back. He would probably replace Willie Golston in the starting lineup. Maybe Golston doesn't end up getting cut. He would definitely at least take a pay cut if J.J. Watt comes in. That would be something that they'd have to look at, basically, whether who he would end up replacing. But they couldn't afford Golston, Braid, and Watt probably. They might be able to, but it wouldn't be ideal for them. But Golston, last year of his contract, and Watt would be replacing him in the starting lineup. He's not really a situational pass rusher, so his value to you would kind of be less at that point. And so they would have to evaluate some things like that. But Watt is a difference maker still. Again, most double-teamed edge rusher in the NFL last season by far. Wasn't even close because there was nobody else in the Texans D-line, still was a top 10 pass rush win rate according to ESPN. I don't even get into pass rush win rate a lot. I don't use that all the time, but I watched Watt. I've seen him. I know that he still plays at that level. May not be peak Watt, but he's still a really good player, and the Bucs could get him affordably in a situation that doesn't hurt their cap down the road. So again,
I was really surprised, John, at the people when that posted on some of the social media groups and things that I was reading when I posted your story, about why and how the Buccaneers could make it happen. That obviously clearly they didn't read your article, because their number one thing was can't afford it, or he's washed up. I think that I read, and maybe it was even in your article, that out of his 10 seasons he's played, there's only been 3 years that he's missed games in. So that means he's played 16 games in 7 schedules. And again, if I'm remembering that off memory, but again, you made a great case on how the Buccaneers could do it and why it makes total sense. Mm-hmm. Again, this isn't a washed up 43-year-old pass rusher. This is a guy that still has some juice left in the tank. You know what else though I think we're going to see, John, and something that we'll talk about as we get closer to free agency is there's going to be a lot of guys. In fact, pretty much any big name that gets released between now and free agency is going to be linked to the Buccaneers. They talk about Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, that's been linked to the Buccaneers already by Jeff Darlington last week. And for good, and Adrian Peterson, another guy. There's going to be a lot of guys because this is a destination that free agents are going to want to come to.
Right.
If you're J.J. Watt, why would you not want to come here and try and win a ring?
Right.
You're not winning one in Houston, clearly not now because you've been released. But how many teams have a better shot than the Buccaneers right now? I mean, the Buccaneers are going to be the favorite, in my opinion, to repeat. And so any name that gets released or is trade talk type rumors is going to be linked to the Buccaneers. But make sure you go to pewterreport.com and find that J.J. Watt article. If you're negative about it, at least read what John has to say about it, because he kind of swayed my mind. Because again, I was one of those people that the first reaction was, well, he's over the hill maybe, or he's declining, which is true. He's not the same guy that he was 5 years ago. But at the same time, there's still some juice left in the tank based on the stats that you brought up. But my big thing was, they're already, up against the cap. There's no way they're going to swing it. But, you made some great points that he's not going to command $24 million. You can make it happen on a 2-year deal. So anyway, go check that out on pewterreport.com for sure.
Yeah, I think last year the Texans paid him $15 million, and that's probably the number. The reason they didn't trade him was teams didn't want to pay that amount of money. They didn't want to pay $15-17 million for J.J. Watt. So my guess is he'll go down from that. I asked a couple of cap experts, and they think somewhere in the $10 to $12 million a year range for probably 2 years is probably what he's looking at. So we'll see what happens if the Bucs can swing it. But either way, we're big dreamers now in Tampa Bay. We don't settle for anything less than the big dreams. That's how it rolls now in Tampa Bay, folks. Those are the rules when you win the Super Bowl. So yeah, we're going to dream a little bit about a defensive line of Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul and Ndamukong Suh and Vita Vea and J.J. Watt. We're going to do that a little bit, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be that kind of an offseason, so make sure you're sticking with us. Tomorrow we'll be back 4 p.m. Again, 4 p.m. I'm not sure. I know Scott's going to be on here, and he's going to be on here with Greg Auman of The Athletic, who's going to be talking about his new book. It's going to be fun stuff with Scott and Greg for sure on the podcast tomorrow. Going to be a good time, as it always is when Greg Auman's a guest on the podcast. And then we'll have good stuff Wednesday and Thursday as well on the podcast. Again, 4 p.m. Eastern, we'll be live all week. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate your super chats. Appreciate you tuning in and supporting another episode of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.